Hi, and welcome. You're listening to the X22 Report. My name is Dave, and this is episode 884B, and today's date is February 3rd, 2016, and the title of the episode is Syrian Peace Talks Are Now Suspended. Next move, most likely an event. Now, before I get started, I just want to make an announcement. The interview with Rob Kirby has been uploaded to the X22 Report Spotlight YouTube channel. You can go over to YouTube and you can see the video there, or you can come over to the x22report.com site, just scroll down a little bit, look over to your right-hand side, or you can go to newssentinel.com. Same thing, scroll down a little bit, look over to your right-hand side, you'll see the video there. Let's get into the economic collapse, political and geopolitical news. Now, we see the Zika virus is continually being pushed as this virus that can be spread sexually, that it can create birth defects, that it's linked to all of these different things. It might be linked to more, but we showed yesterday that a lot of this doesn't make sense because we showed that of the cases that they're reporting, those that actually had the Zika virus is a very small number. So there's really no correlation to what they're talking about. And we know this is part of their agenda. It's to scare the population. It's to push the idea that we need another vaccine. And there's many other agendas associated with this. And we have to remember that this originated in Brazil, where Bill and Melinda Gates, their foundation, was experimenting on GMO, genetically modified mosquitoes. And it's very interesting that it had occurred in Brazil because we know Brazil is part of the BRICS. We know in 6 months, the Olympic Games, they're going to open in Rio. We know Brazil's economy, it's hurting. Was this a plan to try to destroy the economy, which is already declining, but really bring it to its knees by having this outbreak? Because with this outbreak, if they continually use the propaganda that it's spreading, because they're saying there's going to be about 4 million people in the Americas that are going to be infected. Of course, we know in the next couple of weeks they're probably going to up it to 8 million. But are they using this to damage the BRICS and damage the countries that belong to the BRICS, damage their economies? It's starting to look like this. Because as we see, the BRIC banks, they are open for business. They are loaning money. And we can see most of the nations are completely bypassing the dollar. They're using their own currencies, or they're using the yuan, the ruble. And you need to think, maybe this is another part of the agenda. And we know that the economy, the private Western Central Bank nations, the economies, they're collapsing. There's nothing they can do about it. They're going to collapse. The debt that's spread around the world it cannot be sustained. It's impossible. This is why Christine Lagarde from the IMF wanted a 10% wealth tax, to help them out a little bit here. Not to pay off the debt. They just want some more time. But we know most of the countries, the government structure, they realize that eventually the system's going to come down. There's going to be civil unrest. There's going to be riots. A lot of people are going to be out of work. A lot of people are going to be desperate. And we see out in France, by the way of terrorism, they're able to take away people's rights. Now, it's not just France. We've seen it in Belgium. We see it in the UK. We see it in Canada, Australia, United States. And what they're doing is they're trying to remove the people's rights. They're trying to draw in power to a single power structure, which will make all the decisions. In France, we are definitely seeing this. The French cabinet on Wednesday, they tabled a draft law that aims to extend the state of emergency for another 3 months. The state of emergency has been in place since the terrorist attacks in Paris on November of 2015. And they're saying the state of emergency will be prolonged until the law on new judicial procedures is implemented. So it looks like they're going to extend this. People are protesting, saying they don't want this at all. And it allows President Hollande to receive more power. And we see that the United States president already has executive orders and certain things in place to receive power if he needs to declare a state of emergency. We see this in Canada. We see this in Australia. We see this in the UK. All these countries have this. And we know that they realize that there's going to be a huge problem when this economy falls apart. I mean, they're already spying on the people. They have already said, yes, we're implementing these programs to spy on the people, to understand what they're thinking, who they're communicating with. And this is all because of civil unrest, economic collapse, riots. And we're going to see more events occur to take away more rights, to scare the people in giving more of their rights away. This is going to continue. North Korea right now is allegedly helping Iran improve its ballistic missile. Now, we know North Korea notified the UN saying that they're going to have a satellite launch. Of course, all the private Western Central Bank countries are out there saying, oh, it's a ballistic missile test. We're, condemning anything that North Korea does, even if it is a launch to launch a satellite into space, and they notified the UN and they're letting everyone know what they're doing. We still condemn all of this because they must have some type of components that can be used for a ballistic missile. But the thing is, this is all propaganda. And more propaganda saying that North Korea is helping Iran basically extend their ballistic missiles. Remember, certain factions in the government, they don't want peace. They want war. And they will use propaganda to make war happen. Right now, we see South Korea is saying that China flew their jets into Korea's air defense identification zone. And this is the point where the zones of the two countries overlap. And the Chinese are saying absolutely not. And the US is saying, yeah, we think this happened. But again, do we have proof? Not really. Now, the air defense identification zones of Korea and China overlap because Beijing unilaterally announced its own zone in November 2013. Then the South Korean government, in response, announced its own widened zone with US support, but China didn't acknowledge it. So everyone has their own zone, and they're saying this is part of our country. And of course, the corporate media, the US government has to point this out because, again, they're using propaganda and they're using this to provoke war, to provoke China, just like they're doing in the Pacific. When the US sails very close to their islands, little by little, they're poking at China. Little by little, they're poking at North Korea and Russia. Now, in the Ukraine's going to lose about $1.1 billion on exports in 2016 due to the Russian embargo. And Ukraine's economy is really falling apart. It has collapsed completely. Now, Kiev is doing something very odd. They're closing one of their checkpoints in Donbass on the contact line. And their explanation for this was that there was a deterioration of security in the region and they needed to shut this down. And we're seeing that Kiev attempted to break through into Donetsk. The Ukrainian side attempted a breakthrough on the northern outskirts of Donetsk with continued shelling. Now it failed, but we can see what's happening right now. They closed checkpoints. They're pushing forward. And we see Poroshenko out there saying that the risk of open war between Russia and Ukraine is greater now than it was a year ago. Does that make any sense? When they're supposed to be implementing the Minsk II ceasefire agreement? They're saying that Russia is building up its military presence on the border with Ukraine, and he sees open war with Russia right now. And this is showing us that they are building the propaganda to convince everyone that Ukraine will be going to war once again. And they're going to blame it on Russia and the southeastern people. They're continually pushing the idea. Again, the U.S. government, they need to get what they paid for. And if they can't get what they paid for, they will start war. Now, out in Syria, the Syrian army, they secured a major battlefield victory on Wednesday. Assad's army cut the last supply route linking opposition forces in the northern city of Aleppo to the Turkish border. And as we know, Turkey supplies the rebels with everything they need. The United States delivers it to Turkey. Turkey then hands it over to the rebels. They also help the Islamic State with the same thing. They also bring the oil using the trucks into Turkey along this supply route. And the source said the army finally broke a 3-year rebel siege, and they have taken control of these supply routes. Now, Russia helped out with intense bombing in the area and completely destroyed the area. And we're seeing that Russia and Syria are taking back the country. The Islamic State, the rebels, they're being pushed back. They're losing more and more territory. And Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov, he continually lets the United States know, and the coalition forces, that, listen, Moscow will continue its airstrikes against terrorists in Syria until they are defeated. Now, U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry has called on Russia to stop their air raids. Lavrov replied, I don't see why these airstrikes should be stopped against the Islamic State or any of the other terrorist organizations. It makes no sense. Why would we stop it at this point? Why would the U.S. ask for Russia to stop it? Because it's their proxy army. And they're destroying it. They're losing many of the proxy soldiers. This is why Qatar, Turkey, Saudi Arabia, the United States airlifted a lot of them out of Syria into Libya. Now, it looks like Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Turkey, they told the opposition to quit the Geneva talks. And they're saying that they're going to leave the talks because they can't find common ground. So the talks in Syria, they have been suspended until February 25th now. And we're seeing that the Syrian government is blaming Saudi Arabia, Turkey, and Qatar for the suspension. And we know the United States government central bankers, they do not want peace. This is a tactic to delay and to buy them some time. Right now, the U.S. government and their terrorist organizations, they're losing the battle there. The U.S. government's back is against the wall. And like a wild animal, they're going to come out with their claws, and they're going to do something that is not going to be good for the rest of the world. And while these talks are suspended, we might see some type of an event. We know they've been planning on doing something. We know that the U.S. has basically brought in military assets, soldiers, commandeered an air base inside Syria. Remember, the U.S. is not invited into Syria to help fight the Islamic State. The United States said, we're going into a sovereign nation to fight a terrorist group. It's like Mexico or Canada bringing their soldiers into the United States saying, okay, we're going to be fighting a terrorist group and we don't need the permission of the United States government. I mean, would that work? No. This is exactly what the U.S. is doing in Syria. Syria has asked Russia to come in and fight the terrorists. So the United States has an air base. They're bringing in military assets. They're bringing in ground troops into the area. They're getting the coalition forces to bring in more ground troops. And it looks like they're going to mount a ground offensive because right now they can't use the air. Russia has a no-fly zone. Russia has their electronic jamming equipment, which will jam the coalition forces' aircraft and make them useless. They have the S-300 and the S-400 defense missile systems. And guess what? The U.S. cannot battle in this way. And they need the ground troops to go into Syria to help out the Islamic State. This is why the U.S. wants Russia and Syria to allow humanitarian aid. When did the United States care about bringing in humanitarian aid? How long has this war been going on? And when did the U.S. all of a sudden say, you know something, we're going to pause here for a second so we can bring in humanitarian aid? And I'm talking about the U.S. doing this on their own. Not when Russia steps in or the UN steps in. They don't want humanitarian aid. They want to open up a supply line to the terrorists. They want to reinforce them. They want to remove them from certain areas. So while all this is happening, we see the United States and the coalition forces getting ready to invade Libya at the same time. They need, at this point, to kick off war. They need to bring Russia into this war. They need China in this war. Most likely it's going to be Iran in this war. And it's going to be the coalition forces against Russia, China, Iran, North Korea. And this will start World War III. Now, we're seeing from the RAND Corp, and they ran scenarios of how this would turn out in the Baltic region, where we have NATO and U.S. forces fighting against Russia. And this is what they've turned up, and they ran this many, many times. They said the Russian military forces will swiftly defeat the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, which is NATO, and the U.S. in less than 3 days should a war break out in the Baltic region. The RAND Corporation, comprised of American military officers and civilian officials, made the projection, and they are showing that this is a no-win scenario. They're saying such a rapid defeat would leave NATO with limited number of options, which are all bad. So right now, they are letting us know, and this is not the first time they've done this. They are letting us know that if we go to war right now with Russia's superior weaponry compared to what the United States has and what NATO has, the U.S. is going to lose in this area. And if China joins into the fight, it's that much worse. And you know what's going to happen at this point. Once the United States feels that they're losing and there's no way to win this war, most likely those in government, the neocons, they will fire the first nuke. They will fire it at Russia. Now, think about this for a second. They believe in their minds that these missile shields that they've set up, they think that's going to stop the Russian missiles with nuclear warheads from hitting the United States. It won't. They ran another scenario. Most of the missile shields that they have, the missile shields they have right now, are basically obsolete compared to what Russia has and what they can do with their missiles and how they can maneuver on their own. And it makes the intercept very, very difficult. And we can see that this is a no-win scenario at this point. That this is going to devastate Europe. Actually, Europe will be completely destroyed. And the US, this is not like World War II. Missiles can reach the United States. Missiles with nuclear warheads. It's not going to be like in World War II where the Japanese sent up, bombs in balloons and they basically caught the wind current to get them over here to the United States. Missiles will be flying in the air and they will hit our cities. We will see war on our soil. And these warmongers, they don't care. They don't care because they believe that they will still win. And they have bunkers ready. They have their own power grid system. They're prepared for this. And when we see this moving in this direction, the people of the US, the people of Europe, the people in Canada, Australia, UK, we need to join together. We need to say, no, we are not going to war. We're not sending our children. We're not sending our brothers or sisters, because as you know, women will be drafted into this war. We don't want to participate in the U.S. government central banker coalition war. And if we can get enough people together in all these countries, yes, it's a very big effort, but it has to be done. Because the alternative is too horrific to think of. And we're going to have to really pull together and have people open their eyes to see what's really going on here. Listen, everyone, thanks a lot for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. Thanks a lot.